Could Argentina invade the Falklands in 2026? Well, for sure, not really, but let's simulate what would happen if a second invasion took place tomorrow. Now let's assume that in this simulation, Britain is caught completely off guard and that they receive no outside help from NATO or any other external ally. Now currently, Britain has between 1,300 and 1,500 personnel stationed at a base called the Mount Pleasant Complex. On top of this, the Falklands separately run a small force of between 40 to 100 reserve personnel known as the Falklands Defence Force, stationed at Stanley, the capital of the Falklands. Any assault by Argentina would likely come in the form of amphibious landings as well as paratroopers inserting themselves early in the invasion, utilising special forces and marines alongside the Air Force and Navy in close coordination. Any resistance at Stanley would likely be dealt with easily, however the garrison at Mount Pleasant would likely show heavy resistance, and it would take a large coordinated effort by the Argentine armed forces to eventually defeat them, giving the British military time to prepare. By this point, Argentina would temporarily be in occupation of the islands. However, Britain would have by now mobilised its aircraft carrier strike group consisting of Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers. It's now important to note that the Argentine Navy is in a significantly worse position than the British Royal Navy, having barely functional or retired submarines alongside ageing and costly ships. The UK, while dealing with its own defence issues at home, has relatively capable and highly advanced weapons at its disposal. Britain may struggle slightly in the air, largely due to the recently bought F-16s Argentina acquired from Denmark. However, the lack of numbers would see Eurofighters and F-35s eventually defeat and overpower the Argentine Air Force. After this, the British would be deploying Royal Marines and its special forces like the SAS and SBS to land on the islands. Argentina, who would have likely dug in Stanley, would show most of its resistance there. However, it simply would be overwhelmed and eventually defeated by the superiorly equipped and trained British forces. In the end, the islands would be in British hands once more. Overall, it would share a lot of similarities to the First Falklands War. However, it would actually end far quicker and far easier for Britain the second time around. The reason is simple: Argentina has gotten weaker in pretty much every way since 1982. Britain spends over 10 times more money on defence than Argentina, largely due to the crippling economy in the country limiting the military's growth, something the president is keen to fix. So odds are a second invasion would be a disaster for Argentina, and the islands would remain in British hands either way.